Bona tarda, benvinguts a la Biblioteca de Poblenou. Dins el marc de la regata cultural, doncs... Espera, se'm sent? Hola? Sí, ara sí? Vale. Dins el marc de la regata cultural, doncs, rebem el Philip Hoare, que és autor d'aquests 3 llibres relacionats amb el mar i les balenes, que és la seva gran passió, i mantindrà un diàleg amb la Ines McPherson i després hi haurà un petit torn de preguntes. Gràcies per venir.
Hola, doncs. Ui, mare meva, sí que sono fort. Un moment, això es pot baixar una mica, no sé si es pot baixar... Sí? No ho sé, bueno, no toco res per si de cas, em sentireu bé. Primer de tot, benvinguts i benvingudes a... Vale, sí que... Ara perdoneu, perquè això sí que ho he de treure, perquè si no serà un incordio. Adiós. Això, benvinguts a aquesta trobada amb Philip Hoare, que bé, parlarem amb ell dels llibres, parlarem amb ell del mar i parlarem, ja veurem on ens porta la conversa. Sapigueu, com ha dit el Lluís, que tindrem una estona per preguntes, o sigui que si teniu preguntes aneu-les pensant, aneu-vos preparant, i després també tindrem una estona per si voleu que us signi el llibre, que us signarem a fora. D'acord? I res, benvinguts, Philip. Thank you very much for being here with us. El Philip Hoare, si no ho sabeu bé, m'imagino que sí, perquè per alguna cosa hi sou aquí, però és l'autor de Leviatán, El mar interior, El alma del mar, i ara, fa, em sembla que 2 o 3 anys, no me'n recordo, Alberto i la ballena, que és l'últim llibre que tenim aquí en castellà. I bé, una de les coses que li hem preguntat avui quan ha arribat aquí havia estat quants cops s'havia banyat al mar avui. I clar, si heu llegit els seus llibres, no sé si us heu adonat que en cadascun d'ells, quan parla de l'experiència de ficar-se al mar i de nedar, transmet coses diferents. A vegades hi ha com una sensualitat, a vegades hi ha aquell punt d'estar com en contacte amb la vida i alhora amb la sensació de ser petit, diminut, mortal. I clar, jo era una miqueta preguntar-te què és per tu el mar, i si realment això que a mi com a mínim com a lectora m'ha transmet és una cosa que et passa a tu, que realment cada cop que entres a l'aigua és diferent. No, you have to.
All right. So I was saying that every time I go into the water, it's like a little death. It's like being reborn. So the water that we all first experienced was the water inside sac of our mother's womb. So we first experienced the world through water. So we look like whales. Whales and humans all look like the same as embryos. And you're bobbing about. And for me, the sense of being in the water is the sense of being liberated from everything else. So everything else. So this is why I swim. This is about 2 o'clock in the morning. This is Southampton water on the south coast of the UK. And it's not a pretty place. It's an industrial waterway. There are factories. That's an oil refinery on the other side. There are big ships, big cargo ships and car carriers coming up and down. You're familiar from them, the way they visit here. Yeah. In fact, it's like an unglamorous Barcelona. And my connection to the sea, so I was born and brought up, I was born about a mile away from this shoreline. And but for 33 years of my life, I couldn't swim. So I could hear the sea, I could see the sea, I was very aware of the sea, but I was very scared of the sea. And one of the reasons why I was scared of the sea was because when my mother was growing up, she was a little girl, she was growing up in Southampton, and her father, my grandfather, painted along the side of their the family bath. I never saw this. I never met my grandfather. He died before I was born. He painted a big spouting whale, like a cartoon Moby Dick, almost. And the association with the water and the whale and what the water might contain always really scared me.
Okay.
So that's why I didn't learn to swim. I didn't learn to swim until I was in London, a long way away from the sea. I was unemployed, I was poor, I was trying to be a writer and it wasn't going so well, and I started going to a swimming pool, swimming baths, where this elderly lady, who must have been probably in her 80s, she saw me, I was splashing about, and she realised I was trying to make a connection with the water, and she taught me what you need to do is put your face into the water to break that membrane, break the ocean skin, what Herman Melville called the ocean skin. And then you realise you're not going to die immediately anyhow, but then you start to realise it's a supporting, it's a support. We were just talking about this.
Yeah.
The sea, it embraces you. Baudelaire said swimming was like being kissed 1,000 times a minute. So it's the sensuality. Once I realised it was a sensual place, it was a mothering place. Yeah. It was a place of life, not death. No. And so ever since then I've swam every day.
Wow. And
I swam 6 times today. I started at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, that's.
I've just been again now.
That's the thing. When you, I'm also a swimmer in the sea, not that much, and I've gone to the water at night, and the feeling, it's really different from when you have the light, because that feeling of not knowing what's there. It also embraces you. Yeah. But it's like, I know I should be afraid, but I'm not. And that's something that I also find in your books. No, this I know this should make me feel like, wow, overwhelmed, and I'm overwhelmed, but in a good way. So it's, and by the way, the picture is really nice. It's you should go swimming by night. You will find things. Also, you were telling me about your teacher.
Oh yeah.
That it's also about this place we have here. No, more or less. It's because if you've read some of the books, you know that in one night he tells you about the crows and the trees and all that surrounding that. So it's. Your book is not just the sea, but all the nature, because you also talk about birds.
Because the nighttime is when the animals take over again. They can forget about the human condition, the way that the humans dominate their world. So when I go out now at night, I'll see. And I only live in a suburb. It's not like a country village. It's a built-up area. But as I go down towards the shore, there's woods and things, and I see deer, I see foxes, I see hedgehogs, I see bats, rabbits, all these animals. Suddenly, you see more animals than you see humans at 2 o'clock in the morning. So the world is topsy-turvy. It's like they must live that world now, the nocturnal life, which is much more important for them. And they forage and breed, and I like the idea of. So when I lived in London, I was going to nightclubs all the time. I mean, I was really into rock music and dancing. I managed rock bands. I was a punk, and I had bright orange hair.
Wow!
And four earrings and all of that. But now I meet myself coming back. So I go down to the shore and I meet my younger self coming back from a nightclub. We go like that. We ships in the night.
Well, it's another way of living the night. Yeah. It's nice. the other day, well, as they told you, we are having a book club, and we read Leviatán. And one of the things that came to, well, we were discussing was that when we were reading the book, we felt that we could keep reading and reading and reading because there was some kind of... I'm talking in English. Perdó.
Sorry, go ahead.
Perdó. Dèiem que el llibre té una forma de lligar els temes que et porta d'una manera molt natural i que hi ha com una cadència quasi, no? Si perquè entres en un tema, surts d'un tema, t'enrosques en un altre tema i per tant és com una cosa molt orgànica, és un llibre molt orgànic, no? I clar, com a persona que també es dedica a escriure, que es dedica a donar classes d'escriptura, clar, jo em plantejava això, com ho aconsegueixes, no? Perquè a més ja no és només el ritme, és tota la informació que vas posant i que sembla que no, o sigui, no és que no sigui informació, però és com una cosa molt natural. I no sé si això et surt a tu també natural o...
Yeah, it's a really good point. I'm really pleased that it feels like that because I'm not lecturing. I'm not a lecturer in a university, although I am actually. So I feel as though I always feel as though I'm telling this story to myself, for instance. So if I start getting bored, well, other people are going to get bored.
Okay.
So, you know, that's a kind of sense of the flow. I do pay very close attention to the words that I use, and I edit a lot. I will edit a book 150 times. So really, it's quite a lot of work. But that's because... So the book only lives, for me, as long as I'm writing it. Because once it's become a book, it sort of goes out of control, of my control.
Okay.
What is lovely about here, it suddenly comes back to life.
Yeah.
Because it's coming back to life in the way people feel about it or tell me about their experiences. And that's the whole point of a book.
Yeah.
Especially a book like the books I write about, because they're about experience and about sharing that experience as a life journey. And not to be exclusive.
Okay.
So sometimes, especially writing about the sea, when scientists write about the sea, it's very important stuff they're telling you, but it becomes quite exclusive.
Yes.
The language is quite exclusive. And you are made to feel slightly little. Yeah. Slightly. Yeah, I mean, they don't mean it, but that's your father.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I know.
is a scientist, so we know the syndrome. So for me, I want to tell, like, if I met you in the bar, and you started asking me about whales, the way I would tell you about whales is the way I write the books.
It feels this way, no? Like a conversation where you're listening, but you're also talking with you, no? It's nice. And one of the images that I kept in my mind was the one when you are diving. Well, you're like upside down. Again, sorry.
Sorry.
Hi ha un moment que expliques que estàs, diguem-ne, cap per avall, al mar, no? Que estàs, com diguem, no? Sigui submergit i que hi ha la balena i aquesta sensació de veure's, de sentir-se vist, copsat, no? per aquesta balena. I clar, és una de les coses que em va semblar fascinants perquè, clar, jo a vegades sento que no sabem mirar i que a vegades que ens mirin d'aquesta manera pot ajudar. Clar, tu t'hi acostumes, també, per cert, a sentir-te vist per elles?
No, you never get used to it.
Okay.
It's the single most stupendous thing that's ever happened to me in my life. To be with an animal who is as sentient as you, is as beautiful as you, is as curious as you, and who is as much a being as you. So we are all beings because we are being. And I like the word being because it's
nice.
something putative about it, something that you're still trying to get somewhere. You're being.
You're being, yeah. It's true.
And it's true, we are being. And whales have a very great sense of being because they're suspended in an environment which is the overwhelming environment of our planet. You imagine the surface of the planet is 2/3 water, but then imagine the depth of it, down to 11 kilometers. So there's this volume, this is other, it's like an exoplanet, this is other environment that they inhabit. And they must look at us and think, God, don't you get claustrophobic? You know, what, you can't swim? You can't swim underwater? Well, you know, you can't. I mean, they must think we're quite inept. And I sometimes think, when I've been in the water, so the thing that really, really stopped me being, so the thing that stopped me being afraid of the water was being with a whale.
Okay.
Because there's such a sense of comprehension and apprehension, because a whale can understand what you are physically like. Using their sonar, they can understand what you are physically like. So the first time I was in the water with a whale was in the island of the Azores. And we went out and I was making a film about Moby Dick, which is kind of obviously the backbone of Leviathan. And of course, many people's ambition or fear, maybe, the idea of swimming with a whale was mine. And I was on this journey, and we went out in a little rigid inflatable boat, which is just like a motorboat, so it's very small. I went out from this central island of Pico in the Azores. These are just drowned mountains. They're an archipelago of 9 drowned volcanoes. They're the original Atlantis. So they're already a very mythic place. Very deep water. It's 3 kilometers deep, then 5 kilometers deep. So for someone who never learned to swim until they were 33 years old, it was a really scary place to be. And we're going out and we're going to try and film whales. And I'd seen humpback whales already by this point, but I'd never seen sperm whales. Because sperm whales are the whales we all drew as children, you know, square head like that, big spout. And so they kind of look friendly when you draw them.
Yeah. You always draw it with a smile.
Lovely smile. They're not really like that. They are beautiful, but they're very strange creatures. And so we went out in this boat, and as we only had, there's the film person, camera woman actually, the director and the producers, the 3 of us, and then 2 of the crew. It's a very small boat. It's only 5 meters long. And so you're feeling very vulnerable because you're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean from these islands which are quite demonic. There's something a bit satanic. They're black basalt. There's no beaches. There's no sandy beaches there. They're just rocks. Excuse me, I'll take some water. So we're going along, and suddenly the boat stops. And the skipper of the boat says, okay, so this is your chance. Sorry, and all I can see are these lumps in the water. They look like trees floating in the water. And so he says, they're sperm whales. It's only when one great tail rises and then starts to sink down into the water that I realise that they're animate. They're not logs. They're animate. And they're changing colour. Even as I look at them, they're like purple or grey or ebony black. They seem to be shape-shifting almost. There's something about these whales. They are very morphic creatures. They are always not what you seem in some strange way. So anyway, I get in the water. The camera woman comes in, and she's got a big underwater camera. She's never really used it before. We practiced in a swimming pool, but she's never really used it before. So it's kind of recipe for disaster. And I get in. I don't even have time to put a wetsuit on. You would normally have a wetsuit when you're doing something like that. Don't have a wetsuit, just a snorkel and a mask. Jam it on my face, get into the water. Then she follows me, and she is attached to the underwater camera by a kind of cable. Mm-hmm. And she feels as the camera is sinking. So she starts to have sort of a panic.
Okay.
And the producer also has a panic because it's his wife.
Okay.
And so he pulls her right back out. Mm-hmm. And the director says to me, okay, we can't film. Come back, Philip.
No.
I'm not coming back. No. Oh, thank you. That's really good. Thank you. That's perfect. Let me quickly suck one of these.
Pepsi.
Should have had one of these before.
Don't worry, don't worry.
That's really nice. I'll take it out for a moment. It's working. So she comes out with the boat, remember, and the director's telling me to stop, come back. And I'm already sort of a way out from the boat. And let me just put that there. And so I'm looking ahead. All I can see from the surface is indeed a dozen whales, 12 whales. Through the water, I can see nothing at all, because the visibility is only about 10 meters, if that. So I'm swimming towards these whales, but I can't see them.
Okay.
And the director has given up trying to get me to come back. And Zhao, who's the captain of the boat, is saying, to your left, Philippe, to your left, Philippe. He's giving me directions. Because you can see I'm a man obsessed. And he's really sympathetic to this. So he's going to your left, Philippe. So I start swimming to the left. Suddenly there's a whole wall of whales, 12 sperm whales, and these are big whales, 20 meters long the males can be. It's wall-to-wall whale. And I thought, I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, really, there's no training for this job, basically. No. And I think, oh my goodness. And I just hang there for a moment, and then the largest of the whales detaches herself, and I know she's a she because they're matricentric animals. They are ruled by the female. Yes. And she starts coming straight towards me. And so I think, oh, okay. Is she going to open her mouth at the last moment? This is my end of my writing career. Quite a good way to go, though.
Yeah, it's
quite a good way to go. Good publicity. Our author was swallowed by a whale, but he brings you this great book. And at that moment, two things happen. Number one, I lose control of my bodily functions.
Okay.
Because I've never been so scared in my life. Literally, that thing about your life moving in front of your eyes, that happens to me. My life is going through my head. I'm thinking, geez, And the second thing that happens is her echolocation, her sonar clicks through my skull, my sternum and my ribs, the femur and all my leg bones being echoed back to her head.
Okay.
So she is appraising me in sound. It's like a scanner, like an MRI scanner. She's creating this sound picture, a sectional sound picture of me in her head. It's quite ironic because I spent all my life trying to describe a whale, and here is a whale trying to describe me.
Well, that's nice.
And I feel appraised. My mother had died the year before, and I felt I was an orphan, but I'd found another mother. It was kind of amazing. And I really did think that. And at that moment, because I was so sensitized to it, and then she turned on her side, and she came right up to me like this, as close as you are to me, like, and their eyes are about the size of a melon, and she looked at me right like that. And it was the most, I mean, what do you do? And all I could do was to say, sorry.
I'm going, no?
Sorry for everything, basically.
Yeah.
And then she dove from the blue, into the black below, and just became this graphic. So that whale that I drew as a kid, and the way the wheel was there, animated. It looked like something animated, almost animatronic, almost CGI, computer-generated imagery. But it was real. It was real, and it was happening. It was like a dream was really happening. And this blue, this intense blue, and the blackness of her, and the way she occupied the space of the ocean. She was the size and sound of the ocean. And she was like both negative and positive. She was a darkness, and she was almost radiant as well. Because of the feeling you have as being next to something which is so big, but so sentient, so sleek, so exquisite, it fucks you up. Excuse my language, but it really, it messes with your head. In fact, I know one biologist, Hal Whitehead, who's a great sperm whale scientist, he had a student who was echolocated by a whale. She said she'd never been the same since, sort of physically changed almost. And of course, it's a very loud sound. It can be very loud. I had to sign a document for the Azorean government absolving them of any blame if I might be hurt by this sound. But, she could tell, a whale can tell if a human female is pregnant before she knows she's pregnant. Yeah. So the sense of being comprehended in this vast ocean, right in the middle of the Atlantic, it just connects you with everything, connects you with the whole of the world, the whole of the history of the world, the whole of the history of the whales. The whales' evolution, 6 million years they've been on this planet. They have a culture which is matriarchal, matrilineal, and that sense of something, it's like meeting an alien, really is like meeting an alien. And that's I was already writing Leviathan before that happened, but I had to go back and rewrite it, because you suddenly see the story from the whale's point of view.
Yeah,
and I suppose that's the whole point of what I think about it.
Yeah, well, it's, again, tornem al català. Clar, és una de les, de fet, moltes de les, o sigui, clar, potser com es diu, per consciència ecològica o per consciència general, una de les coses que a mi m'ha agradat també molt és aquesta sensació constant de que, desconeixem tantes coses que ni ens ho podem imaginar, perquè ara encara estem descobrint i seguirem descobrint, probablement perquè, a més, no tenim aquesta mirada. Jo crec que hi ha un punt o sigui, la forma de poder, o sigui, aquest sentiment que tu descrius, que engloba, no? Jo crec que a vegades a nosaltres ens manca aquesta possibilitat, no? I de fet hi ha una cosa que comentes en el llibre que és sobre els noms, no com nosaltres quan entenem o creiem que entenem alguna cosa, en realitat no l'estem entenent, sinó que l'estem classificant per nostre profit. Que això també és una cosa que em va cridar molt l'atenció, perquè a vegades no pensem en els noms de les coses. I el del llenguatge, que clar, jo això és part de formació professional perquè em dedico al fantàstic, per tant quan em parles d'aliens a mi se'm dispara al cap, però clar, de fet hi ha a la pel·lícula The Arrival de Denis Villeneuve, que hi ha aquests aliens i tenen aquest llenguatge que costa tant entendre. Clar, també parles del so de la balena, del cant de la balena, d'aquesta dansa que probablement no podrem entendre mai perquè no tenim una lingüista que pugui entendre aliens com en el llibre o en la pel·lícula, però clar, la podem entendre des d'un altre lloc? O sigui, amb aquesta sensació que dius tu tan sensorial?
Very good, that's perfect. That's exactly what I need in my throat. Right, so there's a program now called SETI, which is using AI to record they've got a sonic array, it's in the Caribbean, and they're recording a particular group of sperm whales. So sperm whales have a language, it's not language, it's not using words, it's a click system, and that's like used in sequences, a bit like Morse code.
Okay.
So different groups of different sperm whales have different dialects. They speak, like a Welsh person or a Catalan person or an American Midwester will have a different dialect, but they speak the same language with a different dialect. So the sperm whales all over the world have different dialects. And they define themselves by their culture. Like a Catalan person would define themselves by a culture. A sperm whale does the same thing. But they interact. They're very friendly, like Catalan people, with other whales around the world. They don't, they put up barriers. So there's all this happening. So scientists are actually thinking, and it's quite likely they will be able to have an algorithm that works out how these clicks work. There's not a vocabulary to them. It's not language, but it's communication.
Okay.
Do we humans have a very good record of first contact with other cultures? No, we don't.
No.
And I'm afraid for the whales. I don't want scientists or anybody, I don't really want their world further polluted by our technology. Yeah. We've already messed up their world big time, especially with sound. I mean, that's the most important factor in whale, as you know, and your father knows, that's the thing that's really affecting marine life generally, is the sound we are making in the ocean. It's that the idea of us coming along and saying, oh, it's all right, we're nice now, we're going to talk to you, Well, a whale just say, sod off.
Go to land and leave us alone. Huh?
So science is great, but it imposes restrictions on the way we can think about things.
Yeah.
So it imposes, sperm whales called a sperm whale because the old sailors, when they hunted sperm whales, they believed the oil that came out of the head of a sperm whale was the whale's semen. So they called it a sperm whale. Can you think of an uglier name for an animal? The humpback whale is pretty ugly.
Yeah.
The right whale is the worst one because it was the right whale to kill. Why is he going around being called an animal? And that's not a scientific idea, I know. But the scientific names are sometimes as bad.
Yeah.
So the naming of things gives us the illusion that we control things. We give them a name so we can control them.
Yeah.
That's right, we sorted it all out. They've got a name. Well, what's the whale's name? I'd love to know what a whale's name for us was. It's probably not very flattering.
No, probably not. Probably not. Abans quan estaves parlant del moment en el que vas veure la balena i com has dit shape-shifting, no? Hi ha un tema, sobretot a l'últim llibre, que com a mínim a mi m'ha semblat que hi havia anaves parlant molt de la metamorfosis, dels híbrids, de la transformació, no? Clar, és molt curiós, i de nou agafar una miqueta aquesta idea, no? Si li posem nom a les coses, les fem inamovibles, nosaltres creiem que el mar és això, és únic, la dona és això, és únic, l'home és això, és únic, no? Ho posem tot en etiquetes. I, clar, o sigui, la sensació de... Clar, o sigui, parles d'autors, però també parles de sensacions, no? D'aquesta idea de transformació. De fet, parles del cos humà i també com ens anem transformant. I de fet hi ha un moment que dius que tant de bo tingui una nova metamorfosi i pugui respirar sota l'aigua. Però, clar, jo tinc una idea de per què el mar pot portar aquest concepte de fluïdesa i de transformació, però volia preguntar-te a tu d'on et ve aquesta sensació i per què creus també que ha inspirat aquesta idea potser d'altres?
Well, of course, this whole notion of gender is very putative in the sea. It's not a set thing. So a slipper shell, you have Sometimes see the slipper shells, there are slipper shells that grow on top of each other like that. So the top one will start out being female and they gradually become less female, a bit more male as they go down to the bottom. It's as things suit, you know. Whales, you know, are specifically one gender, but it's not, they don't behave in the way that we use gender to oppress and have always done so. And that's why it's so funny that sometimes, like, I was watching some killer whales, and they were hunting, and the guys in the boat would say, "Oh, look at that male! He's going round. He's later." The female is controlling everything from the back. The orca whale, killer whale. I still quite like killer whale actually, because that's what they're really good at doing is killing. You know, that's what they do. But is entirely determined by the female. So the most important female, any member of any orca pod is the postmenopausal female. The postmenopausal female. There's a lesson for us all. But so that sense of our presumption, especially because a lot of science has been historically male-driven, is to see things from that sort of very patriarchal point of view. And it's not the case, you know. And lots of things in the natural world, so for instance, the notion of homosexuality, no one actually believes in those things in the water, because everything, you just do what you like, basically, with whoever you like. And I've been in the water with a pod of 150 dusky dolphins, and I tell you, they don't care who they're doing it with. So, so that whole sense of that is, because the sea is, it's like really evolution happening before our eyes. You know, things seem to be evolving very quickly there in a way. The seashore is a very evolutionary state. It's what you were saying earlier about the stories that it tells. The sense of time is a very different aspect in that. So the time of the ocean is determined by the moon. And the moon is the first place that told us the time. All our notion of time first existed because of the moon cycles, obviously because of the sun as well, but the moon more cyclically, more, you know, like for the months, and month means moon, that's where that comes from. So, and that is, as anyone who knows anything to do with the sea, the moon has a huge effect, not just on the tides, but on the way what lives in it reacts to those tides. So the notion of the moon as being the goddess of the water is a very beautiful thing, you know. It's a very, you know, time itself is determined by the moon. That actually, as the Earth's less governed by, the Earth's tides are less governed by the moon, it's gradually time is slowing down. It's actually slowing down time. So the days, the Earth is going to slow down. So the moon is actually controlling that sensibility. So the way that the moon tugs at the sea is this, again, things that makes us, diminishes our sense of our, you know, arrogant hubris, our arrogant control over the world, is something way beyond. And that's what, all those animals feel that all the time. They feel that. Everything they're doing is determined by the moon. So, yeah.
No, és clar, és que jo no sé si sou de nedar gaire o d'anar al bosc, però sí que és cert que, clar, o sigui, quan t'oblides un moment de la teva percepció tancadeta, i sobretot si ets urbanita encara més, no? Quan entres en contacte amb la natura des de la natura, no des de tu, sinó des de la natura, jo crec que sí que hi ha una capacitat d'entendre que, bé, o sigui, en el fons jo crec que és una de les coses que també explicaves sobre un dels moments que parles d'entrar al mar, no? O sigui, és aquell punt de soc, existeixo, formo part d'això i alhora m'estic com desintegrant dins de tot això, no? O sigui, per tant, tens un aspecte molt més potent i molt més humil i alhora molt més gran del que estem acostumats, no? I jo crec que per mi ha estat una de les coses que ha travessat tots els llibres i que m'ha arribat més en aquest sentit. Un momentet, vaig a... Oh, encara tinc temps de fer alguna pregunta
Okay.
més. Clar, veig la fotografia i una de les coses que em va cridar molt l'atenció també és com la literatura hi és moltíssim, i a mi que m'agrada la literatura, jo anava dient, mira, aquest sí que me l'he llegit, aquest no, però tot el que també és la imatge, els quadres, no? Turner, per exemple, Verdurero, i, clar, jo reconec que em va arribar molt també Pat i els quadres, no? Aquells quadres que eren meditacions, no? Clar, hi ha una manera també teva molt visual, però clar, és com si fessis un recorregut per com ens hem imaginat, per com hem intentat copsar el mar. I hi ha algun que a tu t'agradi més que un altre? Que jo m'imagino que serà el Durero perquè li has dedicat un llibre, però no ho sé.
Dürer, obviously, because he was the first artist, he was the greatest artist of the Northern Renaissance. He's the first artist to recognize animals' nature for its own sake and portray animals for its own sake. You know, he painted a clump of grass just for what it looked like. And then people like Turner, who painted the sea in the most beautiful way, and then Turner's effect on Herman Melville. And Melville just got a picture, Moby Dick, which is the book which really powered my reading and but you see, Melville was a very visual writer. He's always describing a painting in many ways. He describes a Turner in Moby Dick. And these are illustrations from a 1930 edition. I love this image of a whale where it becomes a sort of astral creature. He's breaking, or she is breaking through the world and into the stars, and that sense of that.
Beautiful.
Yeah, this image from Moby Dick, I love that image as well. Sort of ominous sense of the whale. But I think it's so difficult to, because a whale is really difficult to pin down in its reality. So nothing we can do, even photography doesn't really comprehend. I'll just spin through. It really interests me from an artistic point of view that the whale's own art changed its fate.
Okay.
Because it was the recording in the early 1970s of the Song of the Humpback Whale. You know that song with the...
Yeah.
Actually, I can imitate a humpback whale. So humpback whale, I was in the water with the humpback whale and it was singing. And I realized it has this, like, it dives, so it's moving air between its nasal passages. Okay. It can't, we sing through the mouth. A whale doesn't do that because obviously it's closed its mouth. So it's moving air through the nasal passages. So if you hum and hold your nose at the same time.
Okay.
See, that's pretty much a humpback whale. But I realized it's really funny because I was in Mexico, in the Gulf of Mexico, and we were allowed to swim them there. It's the US government banned being in the water with whales, and it's tightly controlled as it should be, but in Mexico you could just jump off the boat, basically. And I didn't realize the humpback whale sound comes through the surface of the ocean.
Okay.
So because I thought you had to be in the water to hear the boat, and you don't. It acts as a loudspeaker. In the same way as you're hearing something now, it's through a loudspeaker, so you hear the whale. So it's incredible. So the air becomes filled with this sound. But of course I wanted to get in. I got into the water, and suddenly I was like a hydrophone, which is, like an underwater microphone, and I was hanging in the water, and I was kind of receiving this sound. It was like being in the sperm whale, but a very different sound, because it has a long, melodic, it's like a symphony, and it's always changing. It changes every year, humpback whale sound. So it's culture. And it was when that was first recorded in the 1970s that people were alerted to the plight of the whale, which was still being hunted in the 1960s and 70s. In the Azores, they were still hunting sperm whales in the 1980s. And the reason why we connected to the animal, because it had culture, it had music, So that's it's interesting that art has a very important part to play in things, So science, the naming of things is very interesting, and it's interesting material for artists, because artists and writers can take that and tell a story. So the whale of the some of you probably had this record as kids, I certainly did. It was happening at the same time as we were searching for alien life.
Yeah.
Well, the alien life was down there all the time. So that story of the whale really interests me, the way that culture became part of that story. So the first whale I ever saw was at a place called Windsor Safari Park, which is outside London. It's now Legoland. And we went there, my kids, we were very... I realise now, in retrospect, we were real subjects of the Save the Whale movement and the Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth. Those first great environmental movements were born out of trying to save whales. Yeah. And I didn't really know that, but I was being sensitised to it as a kid. And we got our parents to drive us to this oceanarium, which is just a concrete pool in the middle of this, park in just outside London, so we sat in this pool, and you can handy advertisement for Ebensy cigarettes, which of course is very much aimed at us 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds, and these dolphins came in, jumped through a hoop, balanced a ball on their nose, and then got a fish that they ate as their reward. You could see one of the trainers here tickling a dolphin. And I started to feel like really queasy about this, because it's like such a surreal universe away from the kind of way you think about these animals, the beauty of these animals, that here in a concrete pool. And then the dolphins left the pool, and in came a killer whale, an orca. And again, it jumped through a hoop and balanced a ball on its nose and caught fish in its beak, and it was the most pathetic sight. And even and especially when it jumped in the air, and you saw this. You saw how killer whales are huge. People think they're big dolphins. They are huge. And the idea of this whale being treated as a kind of circus animal. And there's still plenty of killer whales in captivity, along with belugas, along with dolphins, still in the world. And that was the thing that really stopped me in my tracks, because I realised the thing I loved and fantasised about could be treated so badly, and we had to pay to see it. And it was and I knew that animal could never be normal. It could never be with its family. Captive killer whales, they still, even 30 years later, are still calling for their families. It's such an abuse, Yeah. So
it is.
But then what really changed me was when I first went to Cape Cod and saw my first humpback whale breach. And this was the opposite of the captive killer whale. This is freedom. Holding it like this great barnacled angel in the air with the longest, 5 meters long, those flippers, the longest flippers. This great barnacled angel. It was just extraordinary. And that was that's what recharged me in my belief in whales. And then, so I'll just quickly show you these images. But so I got that was when I was with the whale, one of the sperm whales in the Azores. I have to just show you. That's where the head ends.
Okay. So,
and that's me, and that's the whale. And we're having a conversation, but I'm not going to tell you what it's about. But what looks like that from above, when you go underneath, looks like that. So subtly it's all reversed. It's like a polar reversion of things. The darkness that we see the whales in from our perspective, the ocean looks so dark, is luminous. It's like a nightclub. And these beautiful animals, these are 2 young males. The thing that really, and talking about art, the thing that really powers me is that why should an animal like that not be aware of her own beauty?
Of course they are.
She's a subadult female, so a young female. She's immaculately marked. She's wearing sort of the Prada fashion, whale fashion, and this extraordinary marking. And she was twirling in the water in front of me.
Deer dancing.
And it was just, why should that animal not regard itself as beautiful? Why should it not?
Yeah.
My friend Jeroen took this photograph of a sperm whale. This is only earlier this year in the Dominican Republic, and this sperm whale is on her back. So sperm whales have an amazing gift beyond echolocation, is that they can see two things at the same time.
Okay.
Because their eyes on the side of their head, so they can see their brains. This might be why their brains are so big. They have the biggest brains in the world. That they are computing two streams of input at the same time. If they want to see a human being particularly, and they are interested in us, they kind of think, well, they're kind of interesting.
Curiosity.
They turn on their backs so they can see stereoscopically. That's the only time they see it. So this whale was doing that to my friend Jeroen, and clicking at the same time. So she was really checking out. They are really interested in us.
Okay.
They are definitely really interested in us.
So
yeah.
Of course they are. No, I mean, it's per descomptat que són conscients de la seva bellesa i que és que nosaltres també teníem aquí un d'aquests llocs on tenien orques i feien aquests saltets i sí, crec que és de les experiències més devastadores que hi ha. I bé, de fet, veure qualsevol animal en captivitat és una bajanada, és no entendre una de les coses que també dius aquí, i és que a vegades ens oblidem de que nosaltres també som animals i que potser ens hauríem de baixar una miqueta al lloc que no ens toca. Ara ja, si vols, podem posar el vídeo, perquè ja...
Yep.
Sí, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Ell ha portat un vídeo, ara el posem i veiem.
So,
I'm not sure. Okay.
Where's I need to get the out.
What do you need?
Right, just go. See, I hope I can work this. Do you mind doing it? Can you do it? Yeah. Oh yeah, okay.
Okay. This one.
And if we could take the lights down, for the film, these lights. Oh, brilliant, wonderful. And then sound up. How's the sound? Got the sound?
Yeah?
Louder? Louder sound?
Large numbers of sperm whales gather each spring to mate. These giant marine mammals live in a world almost completely removed from humans.
Translation of that, what should I translate?
They possess their own culture, their own memories, their own experience. They dive deep into the ocean to feed on squid, using their sonar clicks to echolocate their food. As we entered their world, the warm waters seemed calm and full of life. But quite suddenly, that mood changed. A little to the north, we came upon a pod of about 30 sperm whales. They were gathered together tightly in a group at the surface. As we dove in the water, we could see the adult males had assembled themselves around the females and their calves. We could hear their sonar clicks. It was an extraordinary experience, a vast biomass of marine mammals.
Oh, di ba sing bahin na saya? Oh my god! Oh my.
Suddenly, we realised there were other animals involved. The different sound of their whistles and clicks and their black and white markings gave them away. They were orca, and they were attempting to predate the sperm whales. We watched for 3 hours as this drama played out.
They're attacking here, there you go. They fight.
The orca trying to attack the calves, getting underneath the whales. The young whales are in there. The males are trying to protect the calves from the orca. It's very bad visibility, unfortunately.
The 2 pods of orca were diving under the sperm whales, attempting to predate their calves. Tightly clustered, the sperm whales opened and shut their jaws, partly in stress, partly in defence. They were also defecating in the water, creating clouds to obscure the orca's approach.
That's a huge animal.
All the while, we could hear the contrasting vocalisations, the sperm whale's deep clicks, the orca's whistles and series of trills. It was a charged and dramatic sight, hardly ever witnessed by human beings before. Eventually, the 2 orcapods appeared to be defeated in their attempt. One pod peeled away, another moved to the north. Then suddenly, they dove and reappeared right alongside our little boat. We were surrounded by these incredibly fast, powerful, and highly intelligent animals. We had no agency in this situation. All of the choreography of this encounter was entirely under the orca's control.
It's the most scary thing of my life.
Then they began to circle us, closer and closer.
Keep rolling, keep rolling.
So good, so intelligent. You can feel the way they're attacking us is intelligent.
It was the kind of interaction which has been recently seen in European waters off the Iberian Peninsula and the Strait of Gibraltar. It was exciting and incredibly scary to feel ourselves at the centre of another species' attention. In retrospect, and probably at the time, we realised that they were playing with us. They could quite easily have tipped over our boat if they chose to. At least one female in the pod had a calf with her. As we looked across the bow of our little boat, 4 of the animals charged directly at us. They were creating a kind of compression wave used by other orca in the Antarctic to tip seals off ice floes and into the water. Then they rammed the boat. happened out there in the Indian Ocean. It was a remarkable interaction between 3 species, sperm whales, orcas, and human beings. One which, in the light of recent events off European shores, may hold vital clues as to why these highly evolved cetaceans are reacting to our presence in their world. If we could only translate those sounds, the whole mystery might be solved.
So that is the first time that's ever been filmed. It's the first time it's been scientifically. We had a scientist on board. He was recording with a hydrophone in the water. You know, a hydrophone is like a microphone. When he pulled it back up, it had been bitten off.
Wow.
Yeah. So they were definitely attacking us, but I don't usually were attacking us. They were playing with us. We were on our fishing boat. It was a fiberglass fishing boat. It was 5 meters long. We didn't have no life rafts, no life belts, no flares, no GPS. You know, that would have been the end of us. At any point in time, those animals could have just dispensed with us. And there'd be no witnesses because we're 8 nautical miles away from land, so, you know, it's a very good crime scene. Of course, they didn't. No human being has ever been harmed by a killer whale or orca in the wild. They know what we are. They know what we do. I think the recent interventions with humans off Spain and Portugal, I think those are I think they're partly out of a sense of frustration because they do know humans are impacting their world. They know specifically they're overfishing their world. They can tell that. They know that their prey is being diminished by human activity. But they're not, if they, as I say, if they wanted to harm us, they could very easily do so, and they never have. So it's a very interesting notion of what whale culture is doing now in reaction to human culture. I think it's a remarkable point in time, actually, I think.
It's interesting, yeah. Si voleu fer alguna pregunta, ara és el moment. Per tant, si us ve de gust, aquí podeu... Ja sé que aquestes coses sempre fa que la gent, de cop i volta, tota la gent que normalment és molt atrevida, es torna molt vergonyosa i ningú mai té preguntes, però podeu fer-ne.
Hi. En català. Què és el que ell pensa de la Paul Watson situation?
Oh, sorry.
Espera.
Paul Watson.
Sorry.
Just pause it, just pause it. That's it. Sorry. Sorry.
Què és el que pensa de la situació de Paul Watson? I si pot explicar a l'audiència qui és Paul Watson? Do you know?
Yeah. So I've met Paul Watson on his boat, his huge boat off Cannes, and I interviewed him. I have my reservations about Paul Watson. And Roger Payne, who's the person who founded Greenpeace with Paul Watson, who's the person who recorded Humpback Whale Song, actually, who died last year, he's the person who actually maybe saved the whale by recording that sound. Roger Payne said something really interesting about Paul Watson. He said he really admired him, but he would never allow anyone he knew or loved to have anything to do with him. Because he's quite reckless, Paul Watson. Now, he's a very fired-up man. He's the person from Sea Shepherd. They're very proactive in what they do. He's now in prison in Japan, isn't he? So I'm not sure that confrontation is the way to go. I'm not sure ramming Japanese boats is the way to go. I'm not sure going to Iceland and causing trouble there is the way to go. Not Iceland, but also the Faroe Islands. Those places are undertaking whaling. They're still undertaking whaling. It's the most intensely cruel thing. Animals can take 3 hours to die. It's completely unnecessary. No one has use for whale meat. A lot of it goes to feed pets. But humans are humans and they don't react to being lectured.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider the Japanese people were forced to eat whale meat after the Second World War, after we dropped 2 atomic bombs on them. They were forced to do that by the Americans. So that's why they get annoyed at an American coming along and saying, you can't hunt whales. You know, you decimated our population and now we can't hunt these whales that you made us talk to eat. So all those aspects about it, there's a nuance to the Sea Shepherd story which sometimes gets forgotten. I admire their passion and I admire Paul Watson's passion. I wasn't impressed by him as a person, I'm afraid. He was more keen to show me the watch that Pierce Brosnan had given him. And when they said, the captain of his ship said, he was told me they'd seen whales. They'd sailed up the Mediterranean to Cannes. And I said, what kind of whales were they? And he didn't know what kind of whales they were. So I don't know. I'm sceptical about Paul Watson, but I really deprecate what's happened to him in imprisonment and everything. But it's, you know, the Sea Shepherd is sexy as a campaign. They're very sort of, you know, and you're going to get this done. But I'm afraid it doesn't work that way. Yeah. It just doesn't. You know, it makes the Japanese are worse than ever now on, if you're thinking about the hunting, you know, they've just fired up a new, and, you know, they're not dissuaded by Sea Shepherd, and Sea Shepherd will offer their lives. I've met crews of Sea Shepherd in New Zealand, and they will give their lives to whales. Well, those are quite impressionable young people, you know, and not all of them are, you know what they're doing, you know. So I worry about it. Is my nuanced opinion, sorry. Sorry, that sounded like a lecture. It wasn't meant to be.
Oh, no, it's...
Primer de tot, donar-te les gràcies per als teus llibres, perquè almenys obren un món i una mirada i una sensibilitat que potser no teníem abans, no? Almenys a mi em va passar en bona part amb les balenes. Et volia fer una pregunta potser molt àmplia. En aquest moment que tenim una sensació de no future, que no hi ha futur, que el món s'està descalabrant i l'extrema dreta està guanyant a molts països i el Trump, etc. Com veus tu el futur de la humanitat i com veus el futur de les balenes? I si és compatible una amb l'altra?
So that's not a tall order then, is it? I think whales will save us. I mean, whales nearly did save us. In fact, you know, climate change was limited by what whales do, by pooing and by dying, because their corpses, the whole sequestration of carbon from the air, as did their poo by fertilizing the ocean. And so, you know, the weird and horrible thing is, and I do apologize talking about Paul Watson that way if you're a big supporter, but I do think that whales, it's ironic, isn't it? Because the time that we stopped hunting them, we started showing them in captivity. The time we stopped hunting them was when we no longer had a use for whale oil. So American cars up until 1972, almost all of them used sperm whale oil on their gears, the transmission. All American cars ran on sperm whale oil until the 1970s. You know, a lot of the people in this room are alive at that point. The cynicism of it is that the only reason why we stopped hunting whales is it was no longer economically or commercially viable or useful to us. And so they became useful to us. They had to change. Always whales have to do this job. They have to change according to what we want them to be. So their creation myth in the Bible and the Leviathan and in all sorts of Aboriginal, indigenous myths, creation stories, they're the whales there, and they're scary, but they're foundation things. Then they become the kind of medieval sort of monsters, and they're kind of the scary things, but they're sort of being encompassed by human culture. Then they become part of our economic remorseless just pursuit of progress, and their whale oil fuels the industrial revolution and everything that comes out of that. And then when they've finished that use, they become our entertainers. And then they become, most ironically of all, they become the emblems of environmental movement. And that's such a cynical thing if you think about it, that the way it happens, but I think the whale has borne all that history on their backs, and they've survived just about. Some of them won't survive. The right whales, the North Atlantic right whales, which I'm very familiar with, we know they're down to 343 animals. But they don't have the gene pool to survive this century. That's happening off the coast of the richest country in the world, the richest country of the world. So if that can't be stopped, but humpback whale populations are going up. Some whales are doing okay. And we can, as humans, give ourselves a pat on the back. Because we did stop the hunting of whales, and that has resulted in the resumption of some whale numbers. So I think the whales offer us a big symbol of hope. And that's what I really feel about it. And that I think, yes, and I do think, we save the whales, well, maybe they can save us.
That's nice.
Sorry, long answer.
Can I ask the question in English?
Yeah.
Does that work? Thank you very much. It's very interesting, Philip. Which for you is one of the most interesting migratory routes of whales? Well,
I think really interesting is the migratory routes of the southern rights and the humpbacks of the Pacific, who were the animals, and this is a human question as well, so the Polynesian peoples followed those routes to New Zealand. So New Zealand was settled by humans because they were following migratory routes of whales. So the Maori have this really intense relationship with whales in that respect. So New Zealand, which they call Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud. They believe that whales and kari trees, we were talking about this earlier, kari trees, these very long-lived trees, are kind of wrinkly, like a sperm whale, and their own ancestors, their own human ancestors, are the same thing. There's a kind of merging of the natural world in there, which is a kind of a spiritual and an allegorical or metaphorical thing. But the idea that human culture is born out of whale culture, of the migration of whales. But then, of course, they achieve extraordinary feats of migration. What's really interesting about the migration of whales is they're using their natural GPS to do that, like birds, iron particles in their brains which align to the electromagnetic currents in the Earth's crust, and they're moving along those lines. So they've got natural GPS, and the fact that those orca, the killer whales who were using that technique where they nearly tipped off our boat by swimming directly at it to flip over the boat, is technique that's used by killer whales in the Arctic and Antarctic to flip seals off ice floes. Well, we're at the equator, long way away, the furthest you could be from the poles. So what's happening there? Is that a migratory thing? Is this learned behavior moving through orca society, orca culture? The interventions that began off Spain and Portugal about 5 or 6 years ago now are now happening off Scotland and possibly Norway. Those are separate pods, separate discrete populations. So killer whales aren't migratory, but the culture travels. It's an amazing notion.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Someone else? See? Okay. Well, okay.
I want to thank you again for being here. And Leviathan, I thought, was absolutely marvelous. So thank you for that gift. I have a question in regards to writers. You mentioned 150 editions of the book. Is there anything that, if you were to go back and do again, that you could give as advice to writers of like, or maybe other than the tone that you also mentioned and making it kind of bar speak, that you could, advice that you could give to writers or editors?
Only that you have to be within the kind of possibility of having to do 150 edits. So you have to have that mindset that the end of the book is the end of the book for you. So number one is to enjoy it. And if you're not enjoying it, if it's not the first thing you want to do when you wake up in the morning, you're not really doing the right thing. If it's not what you want to do most of all, I think that's one thing. And I think the correlation of that is that to enjoy it, really enjoy it. If you're not enjoying it, there's no point doing it. If it's just hard work, I really, really love writing, and I just will do it all the time. You know, it's the only other thing that, other than swimming, that like diverts me away from being, you know, having to make money or whatever, you know. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think your voice is the most important thing. It's your voice. And you find your voice, and then you just follow your voice. The editing, actually, it sounds hard work. I mean, it is hard work, but it's also really good fun, and it's the creative part. It's like, it's making a really good pasta sauce, and you reduce it down, and it gets stickier and more pungent and more beautiful, and you just come down to the essence of what the pasta sauce should be about. That's what writing's about, really. You come down to, oh yeah, that's what it wants. And also the work finds its own shape. The work, it will tell you what it wants to be. It absolutely does that. It sort of goes out of control, really, and then it goes, and then it's working. The bad thing is then you have to stop it. You have to learn to put on the brakes. But yeah, that moment, it's the moment of giving it away. You know, if you're lucky enough to be published, it's the moment at which your editor has to prise it from your fingers like this, before, and then you leave go, and it's like saying goodbye to your child, and they go on their way, but you still look after them. So I'm here looking after my children now, my infants. They've grown up now, and I can be proud of them. Be like, you know, and I love my books. I do sometimes take them down and stroke them. I don't reread them, but I sort of like pet them, put them back on the shelf.
Well, thank you very much, Philip. Thank you, all of you. And, well, això, moltíssimes gràcies per estar aquí. Gràcies a tu també per haver vingut i sobretot per aquesta conversa que la veritat és que podria seguir, però ja la biblioteca ha de tancar, per tant, en breu. Per tant, ara, si voleu, signarà llibres, d'acord? I això, moltíssimes gràcies. Thank you very much.
Thank you.